Good evening. This is the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board. I'd like to call this meeting to order December 20th, 2022.
Hold on there.
Yes, it is. Good evening, Mr. Pear.
Good evening.
Welcome.
How are you?
Good, you?
Football so good.
Do we have anybody joining us remotely?
No, so far just us.
I'm going to start this meeting with a moment of silence for the tragic loss of Baxter Waldman. Good evening. Again, this is the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, Tuesday, December 20th. Somebody make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Make a motion to approve. I'll second that.
Motion's made by Mr. Anderson, seconded by Mr. Bossy to approve tonight's agenda. All in favor, Mr. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Pear,
Hi.
Mr. Bossy,
Aye.
Mr. Franzuto, the chair votes aye. We have no minutes for tonight. Nothing in the chairman's report. And Marine Department report.
We have no Marine Department on tonight.
All right, do we have anyone from Natural Resources
No
yet?
Natural resources on it.
Right. Vineyard Wind. I sent out some information sent to me by Amy DeCivio. She may join us tonight. And we can move this discussion to a later moment. All I ask is the board to review the information and I think we could discuss if there are effects to our harbor. And how we may or may not support Ms. DeCivio and what she's doing. An update from her would be nice. And I've spoken with select board member and they, as we know, have signed off on this, and we are expecting a payment of sorts. And his understanding was this was simply a done deal. The town would have to invest considerably in litigation if we were to try to argue against the project. And also in that manner, that would relinquish any possibility of mitigation funds. So, but it's interesting. It sounds like there's somebody involved in NOAA that's being a so-called whistleblower and coming out with some information that may not have been exposed during the permitting process of this project. And it's information that looks like it has some negative effects. So at this point, if anybody else would like to discuss anything on this matter, we'll move forward otherwise. Right. If there's more information, I'll be sure to forward it.
Thank you.
Green crabs. Scott,
Nothing new.
anything new?
Nothing new on green crabs.
Okay. Anybody else? Discussion on green crabs? Harbor Action Plan Committee update and discussion. So Peter and I believe maybe at the last meeting, we were talking about considering recommendations. And we have a lot of priorities that are on our agenda all the time, a lot of things we discuss, and obviously this is a place where some of our thoughts and ideas can be moved forward, so to speak, and possibly be a part of this plan. So basically what I see is let's prioritize and have some discussion of what's important to us, that we forward with a recommendation at a later date.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it looks like the meeting is, the first couple of meetings are gonna be mid-January, so I'll keep the board apprised of that.
Okay, all right, and basically how they're gonna structure it. I'm
Yep.
not familiar. You've been there before, Dave, and it sounds like a good group has been brought together. There's representation from the Shellfish Association as well. I heard Samantha Danette was selected as an at-large member, as was Steve Linebeck. So got a lot of good minds there. As far as stormwater and dredging, I think these are things that need to be discussed and put into this plan. Every issue on our agenda, really, fertilizer, green crabs, they all deserve a consideration, that some type of a plan
Yeah.
that action can be taken from, results from this, versus just lengthy discussion and nothing being
Yeah.
done.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that there's a place in the harbor plan update for all of our, consideration, or all of our concerns, and like I said before, I'll say it once again, is the harbor plan, the one from 2009, really did succeed with the action items. And I'm not sure that they'll set it up the same way with the matrix in the back. But the matrix basically identified the problem, and then, or the priorities. And then there again, I think that at those meetings and those, when we get that far along, when the priorities are being discussed, that's a time for us to lay that out on the table and say, well, I agree that those are good priorities, or I think this is more, that's the time to do that. And then the matrix tasked whoever was responsible, and in some cases identified a funding source, because we know that some of this stuff costs money. So even if it's identified in the next year's budget, or whatever, but you'll come out away from it with ways to get our stuff done, which is what I think is important.
I mean, the harbor plan stays in place for quite a bit of time. I mean,
Well,
basically forever.
It's good for 20 years, and then you have to renew it. And one thing, when I did talk to Kristen Erwick the other day about this, I talked to her probably 2 weeks ago. They Urban Harbors has fine-tuned their process too. Because they've done many communities since they did ours in 2009. Well, 2007 through 2009, it got adopted. That's the other thing about the harbor plan. And I don't know if I said this before, but the one thing about the harbor plan is it needs to be adopted by the Board of Selectmen, so it has more teeth. And it's signed off by the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs. So it's not, it becomes a regulatory document. Far different than some of these other plans that we have sitting on the shelf.
It's not just a plan.
Nope.
It's got strength.
Nope.
Yeah.
Once, if you look, I know it was sent around, I think Andy sent it around or Jeff Carlson sent it around. If you look at the beginning, first 6 or 8 pages, it's the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs Director guidance on how to, to move forward and a signature. It's a regulatory document and it changed a lot of things about chapter 91, specifically about what can happen on the waterfront as far as allowable uses and things like that and permitting to ensure that certain things got done when new permits were issued for construction or whatever. So I think you'd be happy with it. It's just, and like I said, I think Urban Harvest is streamlined it a little bit because they've been the contractor for several other communities, I know.
So being in place for 20 years really opens itself up to funding multiple levels over the course of time.
Most definitely. I mean, I'm not so much, I don't really agree or disagree with the 20-year thing. The first harbor plan that we wrote in 1993 was a local harbor plan, was adopted by the Board of Selectmen. But so it was in place from 93 till about 2005, 2006, and then we wrote a new one. So I think it can only help and can only get better.
Well, Dave, in your recollection, anything that we're discussing here tonight on our agenda, are they items that carry over from the previous plan
Yep.
you were involved
Most
in?
definitely. Yep, fertilizer, stormwater, they were addressed. Maybe not to the degree that they're being addressed currently with the fertilizer regulations and things like that. Stormwater with the new plans that are coming out, the stuff that you sent is really good. That link, you're right. There's a lot of information on there.
There's a lot of effort, right?
So we're a lot further along with mapping and things like that. So yeah, I think everything is on the table and everything should be included and discussed.
And, even though like tonight, we have no attendance as far as an audience or representation. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm leading into our meetings being recorded. It's displayed on YouTube, and I'm hoping what we're discussing is being heard by the people who need to hear it. As far as creating a map that shows where runoff comes from, where it's going to,
Most definitely.
and the idea of getting that map into every homeowner's hands. I recently was involved in a discussion about the watershed to Myacomet Pond. And the reason the discussion came up was because of the appropriation for the dredging of Myacomet Pond. And the question was, why is it in this condition that it needs to be dredged? And why do people who live nearby fertilize their lawns? And when you look at, as the size of the watershed to Myacomet Pond is gigantic,
Yeah,
and probably 95% of the people who live in that watershed don't realize they're in that watershed.
No,
And if they were all given a map that showed where they are and their location to the watershed, and that their yard can affect that pond, then I think it would give a better understanding to each individual who is in there. And so I leave here hoping our voices are heard in that manner, because this is really something that it should be in the hands of Natural Resources and Health Department together. Stormwater, I guess they're putting the stormwater onto the lap of the sewer department. So some progress is being made there. They understand these issues are there. I just hope that our continued discussion feeds some information and keeps them continuing with taking action.
Well, if I may.
Yes.
When I used to manage the ponds, for 25 years. And got the legislation passed so we got the rights in 1993 to open the ponds, because we had lost that right because we didn't hold a permit to do it. We went and got state approval to start opening the ponds again. To your point about Maya Comet's watershed is like 20-1. The size of the pond, the contributing watershed to Maya Comet Pond is 20-1.
Mhm.
Most of these other ponds is 8, 7, 6.
Right.
So the watershed for Maya Comet is enormous, and it's been studied significantly
Mhm.
because we had emergency openings because of flooding and, all those types of things when we were managing that pond. Maya Comet Pond has the same permits as Sackage and Hummock, but Sackage and Hummock, we went even further and set time frames where they have to be open in April and September. Under the permit. Maya Comet was on an emergency basis. Primarily because Maya Comet is a freshwater pond. It's assimilated itself into a freshwater pond. So it doesn't benefit from a semi-annual or annual opening to get fresh salt water in there to like we do at Sackage and Hummock. You want the salt water to come in at Sackage and Hummock to replenish, the fish and the shellfish and the eels and the striped bass and everything that lives there, and the oysters live there. Maya Comet Pond is a freshwater pond. Years ago, there was literally a pipe in the beach that had a valve, and they put it in to drain the pond when it was at a flood level. It lasted one winter, and then the storm came in, took the pipe away, and here we are. So Maya Comet is a whole nother animal. And ponds, all ponds, I don't care, my pond in my house, all ponds want to fill in. That's their natural progression. They want to fill in. The silt and the whatever, they want to fill in. And what's happened with Maya Comet Pond is it doesn't have the basin capacity to hold the water from that watershed, which is why you have the flooding issues. There's so much water going into the pond that the pond reaches, if you have a rainy winter, slow winter, the pond fills up, and then the roads become impassable, and then you've got to do something about it. So that's why it needs to be dredged. It needs to be dredged to get the bad stuff out of there and to make the basin bigger to have more water capacity.
If I might add, I was thinking that maybe these runoff maps and these watershed locations that we've been talking about, a map could go into the update as a project, as a project to be formed, because it's going to encompass 3 different groups. Probably it's going to encompass the sewer department. It's just a thought to put it, and we could be on the hook in the document for it.
Mhm.
But it would get it out there and get it in front of people. And I think draw cooperation from all the groups. We're getting great cooperation. Emily's been great steering me around to where to look for stuff. But anyway, it might just be something else we would put in this proper update plan.
And the other thing, I mean, just a thought, it just came to my mind is that, there's gonna be plenty of time for public input for the plan. And there's gonna be action items that come out of there. Maybe one of the action items is that, and I don't know how you do it, maybe you do it over a couple tax bill cycles. Where, I know it can be broken down by the abutters or in this case, the water people that live in the watershed, to your point, Andy. Okay, so I'm in the Maya Comet watershed, and those people get a map with their tax bill.
Right.
You know, and then next tax cycle, you do humming.
But that's a lot of interdepartmental cooperation
Sure.
required, which is why
Sure.
get it down,
Yep.
make it so
Yep.
it must be done, and these people must cooperate to do
It's
this,
just,
driven by whoever, but
it's just an idea, or
Yeah.
maybe you do what we did. With the FEMA flood maps, this is another idea that just came to mind. When the new FEMA flood maps came out. We held several public hearings and people could come. And we had an interactive screen. And you could come in and say, I'm concerned about my area being in a velocity zone for a storm. And you could come in and we could pull it up and it would show whether you were in a velocity zone or not. So, you know, maybe you hold some public hearings and say, you know, if you want to know if you're in the Myakama watershed, then Tuesday night, we're gonna have an interactive screen and you need to come and find out. What a lot of the people did with the FEMA flood maps, it became not so much for Nantucket because after the no-name storm, places like Hulbert Avenue, most of those people raised those houses and they had the wherewithal, financial means to be able to help themselves, so to speak. But it became an insurance issue. I mean, I had a property that, well, I'll tell you two funny stories. One man by Long Pond, his property was in a flood zone. But only half of it. And his garage was in a flood zone, but his house was fine. And the funny story is the town building. The flood map goes right through the middle of the town building.
The DPW.
The town, building,
County
the
building.
big town,
Okay,
and right across, and if you don't believe that. When you go, the next time you drive by the town building, look at the Rosencrown side of the building, and you'll notice that there's 4 or 5 steps that go up into the building. Go to the other end of the building and it's flat.
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
4-foot difference, and 9 feet is the zone for FEMA. But it just goes to show you that, but that's just brainstorming, but you know, you could do that. You know, Shab is gonna sponsor a interactive meeting for
Mhm.
pond, for,
watershed,
watershed,
education.
just an idea.
yeah, I mean, I think education's gotta be key, because just giving people a map in their tax bill. it's
Yeah,
They're already
that's-
gonna be
you're
upset.
probably
It's
right.
going out.
Unless there's a big red X.
With their house, yeah.
So I think there's a little more to it than just the map, obviously, but.
But anyway, it's an idea.
All right, just looking at the agenda here and thinking how Peter did this week, neither one of us had our previous agenda with us, I guess, Harbor Action Plan Committee update and discussion and new business, we talked about recommendations, which we're kind of doing now. Anyhow, any other discussion at this point, the Harbor Action Plan Committee, knowing that we have time, of course, that this is just starting out. Sometimes I feel like things are already past due, and we'll get to that in the next segment. Mr. Bossy, did you have something?
Just I didn't know where to put this in, but this is as good a place as any. If you have an opportunity, there's a book called Eat Like a Fish. Library's got it. If you have an opportunity, grab it. You can skip over some large chunks because it covers history, but it's about a fellow from Connecticut who, well, he ended up starting in Connecticut, his project, sea farming. And the benefits of sea farming, and it's simple and it's inexpensive to do. And you don't necessarily have to do it to raise oysters, mussels, whatever. There are all these benefits to kelp and sea farm. But anyway, it's a great read, quick read. The guy he did this, and there's this whole program out there to do this and use it to clean harbors. And it's fascinating. It's like everybody, if you get a chance and you're looking for something that's an interesting read, check it out. It could fall into a harbor update idea. That's all that we might want to look at a project like that.
That's very interesting. You bring that up. A previous member that served on the board, Joe LaPuma, he still lives in Mattocket, he came down with a condition that really floored him for a while. He had to learn how to walk again. I forget the name of the condition that he contracted, but just before he left the board, he was doing some studying and research, as Mr. Anderson is doing with the green crabs, on kelp and its benefits.
Mhm.
And if its addition to the harbor, can benefit without being a negative impact on anything else. And it would be, that was like a good, it's an example I took, and I think I've mentioned it to every new member who's come along. The other member that served in that term with Joe LaPuma was Fritz McClure, and he basically focused on eco-friendly moorings for his 3 years with us. And I was just like proud of that each member had something they really felt passionate about and stuck with. And the eco-friendly moorings, more difficult to implement, and questionable how much benefit you get from them. A lot of it has to go through Sheila and as well, and the mooring handlers and the equipment they have to deal with some of the moorings. Dave, I'm sure, is a lot more rehearsed on the different moorings that were offered at the time, but I'm only bringing that up as an example, with Dave mentioning the kelp and that it just seemed like good inspiration coming from individuals from the board, which leads me into our next topic, sediment transport and dredge plan. If we're done and have harbor actions plan, anything anybody'd like to add? We'll bring it up again in new business if need be, if you think of something. But so the sediment transport and dredge plan, Dave, you might be able to help out with this, of course, because you're familiar with what they go through with this. So it was put to bid, and that it's put to bid to create the plan. The plan is not made yet.
Right.
But can we imagine that Mr. Carlson already has some ideas, or areas that need attention on his radar that he will share with this?
Well, we CLE Engineering did a dredge plan with a schedule and permitting for us, probably 2018, and identified some funding sources. It's how the sandbank was, it was one of the ideas that the sandbank came out of. So what I'm sure Carlson's going to do is he's going to take those list of priorities, which had the historic dredge dates. I use Pulpus Harbor Entrance Channel as an example, 6393, 2018, so you can kind of extrapolate a schedule that you can work with. And the permitting has greatly, the timing has greatly increased, but the town now should hold permits, a blanket permit, so you don't have to go back on each individual time you want to dredge to get the individual permit. So it's a blanket permit to do all of these projects. So I'm sure what Carlson is doing is he's taken that, which was the identified needs, with a schedule and some permitting and planning and money ideas, and he's going to give that to them and say, okay, work with this, update it, tell us where we're going, what we should, are the priorities the same, or should they change? But it has to be any of these big projects have to be in the Federal Register. And then the contractors apply, and then you sit down with each individual contractor and you interview them and say, okay, this is what we think we want to do. Tell us how you're going to help us do that. And then it's time for lots of input from other folks with the contractor, public meetings. Very similar to the harbor plan. Sit down with them. They would be the urban harbors of the dredge world, and sit down with them and say, okay, we need to update this and we need to move forward. So we're not behind the curve on a sediment transport and dredge plan. Now, I know that our dredge plan only identified navigation channels. Okay, very difficult to get a permit to outside the navigation world, because for instance, I'll use the jetties as an example. When we went to the Corps of Engineers and met with them about dredging and reconstruction of the jetties, the byproduct of reconstruction of the jetties and dredging was to improve water quality. And the assistant director from the Corps, it's not a word of a lie, sitting at the table, he put his hand up and he said, that's not our mission. We know you have concerns about water quality in Nantucket Harbor, but that can't be in the permit. Navigation and, safe navigation, they'll talk to you about it all day long, but water quality isn't one of their missions. And so we didn't include it in the permitting. We didn't include it in the fund when we asked for funding from Hurricane Sandy money. My point is that it's really easy when you say, I've got 250 boats in Pulpus Harbor that can't navigate the channel because you can't get in and out. I can sell that all day long on based on navigation. Did the velocity in the channel increased by 3/4 of a knot? Has it improved water quality? I don't know. I would like to hope it has. That's 3/4 of a knot in and out twice a day. And also the fact that the velocity going down the channel of the volume of water going down the channel and back out twice a day was greatly improved because the jetties didn't have the big holes in them anymore. Okay, so all that water would rush down the channel, if you can envision this, would rush down the channel on an incoming tide until it got to a certain level, and then it would just spill over the sides and go out the holes, and so you lost a lot of volume of water going in and going back out. So when we raised the jetties and we repaired the jetties, the volume was also increased and the velocity was increased. So a byproduct is we hope it improved water quality. So I mean, navigation you can sell, because one of the sign-offs on a dredge plan or on a dredge project is the Corps of Engineers.
Which leads me to, which we had, lots of discussion in the past about, and you, Dave, how many times I described all the erosion in the harbor,
Oh, yeah.
the sand in the harbor, eelgrass beds smothered by sand. And then along comes some eelgrass restoration projects. Discussion about a micro dredging project to get this granular sand out of the way for the eelgrass beds. And who was it that we had here that
Steve McCarron.
and he seemed to find the idea interesting. He said what you said for the most part about navigation, but saw the possibility of this type of project if presented properly.
But the difference now with this request for proposals for somebody to come in is the sediment transport, which is what you're talking about. This is not sediment transport, I've never used those words up until recently with the silting over of the eelgrass and the sediment moving up and down in the harbor and off the spits and all that. So the fact that they're putting an RFP out for not only a dredge plan, but a sediment transfer portion of that. That's very, very key important to what you're talking about. It's never been included before. When we wrote the dredge plan, when I had CLE do the dredge plan in 2018, it was a dredge plan. And like I said a minute ago, it was for navigation. So this is the first time, and not only that, you've got the traction from the coastal resiliency thing now. So this can be talked about. So this, this is the time, the timing is right for sediment transport and smother and eelgrass and that sort of thing.
So sediment transport does not just mean getting the dredging spoils
The
from one
spoils.
place to another.
No. You're talking about sand that is coming into the harbor.
The
Again,
sand that we've
it's a
been
pond.
talking about,
It's a
yeah.
pond, it wants to fill
Yes.
in, so the sand's coming off of Pockama Point, or coming off the spits, or
Every
coming,
beach,
every beach.
yes.
That's sediment transport, which is smothering the eelgrass and sediment transport up and down, sure, sediment transport. If you pump it onto, I use the Pockama Point project. We pump the sand on the Pockama Point, and then we nourish the point all the way down with the sand. Yeah, that's sediment transport. But I'm talking about what sediment transport that happens in the natural,
Yeah.
which is what you're talking.
And that's what you see in
Yes,
this type.
most definitely.
Okay, all right, well, you've just enlightened me and
No,
given
because
me hope for the new year.
Pulpus Harbor dredging, we staged that sand in barges, dewatered it and stored it out by the airport,
Mhm,
and then sold it,
mhm,
which was what the sandbank,
mhm.
so the permit for Pulpus Harbor dredging the last time had the sandbank idea in there. And it got permitted by the state and the Corps for us to stage sand because we're running out of sand. We barge sand over here to use. We're running out of sand, why not sell it? And our argument at the time was all of that sand could be sold to SBPF at any given time, because they needed that much sand for their annual contribution. They've since defaulted on that, but that's a whole nother subject. But that's what I see as sediment transport.
Okay, all right, well, Dave, help us stay in the know on that as well, because I'm hopeful that a pilot project of some sort that includes, improvement to eelgrass beds by removing sediment, it can be interpreted in a way into this plan so that it can be approved in the next type of eelgrass restoration project. It bothers me that the land bank is going to continue, with their project without dredging being a part of it, or not the land bank land council at Fifth Bend, because it's fairly obvious when you look at the area that it is nothing but sand. There is no eelgrass there. There is no growth on the bottom. Therefore, in my eyes, the perfect prime place to try out this type of project, because you're not disturbing any existing eelgrass.
Right.
And or bottom growth of any sort, and it seems like it's a right area to dredge first. But since our discussions on that, I've thought of, the way I described it as a micro area. I'm concerned that, I'm not special in this arena, is a micro area simply going to fill in faster from the sands around it that we didn't
Well,
bother? And does it need to be effective? Does it need to be 3 times the area you're going to plant, knowing that it's gonna slough back in?
Yeah.
This is where we need the specialist to acknowledge, first of all, that we have this filling in process that's taken place, I believe, much faster in the last 20 years than it did in the 20 years before that.
Mm.
And
the thing of it, it's a catch-22. If you're gonna dredge, there can't be any shellfish there. If you're gonna dredge, can't be any eelgrass there. You know, the last time, like, I keep falling back on Pulpus Harbor. Pulpus Harbor, the first time we dredged it, we took 40,000 cubic yards out of it. The last time we dredged it, we took 9,000 cubic yards out of there and had to snake around the eelgrass. You know, because there was more eelgrass there than there had been before. But to do an eelgrass project, there can't be any eelgrass there. You know, you see what I'm saying? And as far as the sloughing is concerned, hey, I can't remember the year, but we threw a whole lot of money. We dredged the 3 spits going up to the head of the harbor. And it was one of those projects where the money came from, I can't remember, the state or the Corps or somebody. We had the permit, we did it. I think we took 10 or 12,000 cubic yards out of there. We should have taken twice that much, but we didn't have the money and we didn't have the permit to do it. We dredged. 2 years later, you went back there, it was like we were never there. And to your point that how much sand is moving around in here.
it seeks its own level like wet concrete.
Oh, it sure
And
does.
This is where, you know, the engineering and the science has to come into play to help us make the idea work for the best of what, you know, the harbor really needs. So, okay, Dave, great to know that the timing is good. Any other discussion on sediment transport and dredge plan?
So with the sediment part, is there any way you can tie that into being like a pollutant? And then deal with water quality related to a pollution type situation? If it's
Well, that's a great question because, you know, on the closer end of the harbor, you know, like I've stated before, Tim Mooney, active scalloper, veteran of the Coast Guard. He dives, keeps his boat in the Easy Street Basin. Often he will wade out to his boat in his dry suit to go scalloping, and he's just out beyond the Christmas tree dory in Easy Street Basin, and he has mentioned that when he walks out, once he gets about waist deep in water, he can't see from his knees down. And what we're seeing, I believe, is a proliferation of mulch washing into the area from surrounding
So that's what I'm
areas.
just trying
Well,
to
dredge-
see how you spin that dredging process.
in
with
the dredging-
pollution on items that aren't
Yeah.
supposed to be there.
Easy
Right.
Creek Basin was identified in that 2018 plan. You also got to remember that we rebuilt the bulkhead in Easy Street. The silt, the fine silt that is in Easy Street Basin is caused in part, probably not 100%, but is caused primarily by the high-speed ferries sitting there,
Hmm,
and it
with its
when they
propulsion,
and
yes.
it's pushing that in there. The other thing is, we never had, up until, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 years ago, we never had the situation where the steamship itself, the Nantucket or the Eagle or whatever, did the spin around.
Hmm.
And now they're backing down 6, 8, 10, 12 times a day. And moving that sand in there. And where's it all going? It's going right up into Easy Street,
Hmm,
you know, and that's why, to Mooney's point, and I've known Mooney for 30 years.
mhm.
The thing that, to Mooney's point, it's that fine silty
Mhm.
stuff that gets agitated 12, 15 times a day. So, but to give you a little comfort, dredging of Easy Street Basin was one of the projects.
Mhm. Well, good to know. So these are the types of things, I guess it's been such a peeve of mine, I should try to draft something that the rest of us can discuss and alter and revise to turn into a recommendation that we can send as a board. So I guess, sitting down at the desk and just trying to throw out some of these ideas and then getting them into the right words with your knowledge and Peter's knowledge and whoever else can.
I don't have any knowledge, I just got a lot of longevity.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
Yeah,
shed this
well,
blood before.
Your experience. And memory. So anything else on sediment transport, dredge plan? Pool water discharge discussion. I'm simply just, some bad things turn into a good thing. It sounds like it took this Monomoy thing to kind of wake up the dinosaur and hey, this really is an issue that's happening. I think the proper boards have it in their lap. Here again, it's something we need to keep our ears open about and hopefully get a report from Natural Resources, what they're doing to move forward with any, regulations for this action that people are taking place.
Not to digress, but when you said that, having said everything that I said before, and I stand by it, you're not dredging Myakama Pond for navigation.
Right.
You're dredging Myakama Pond for water retention and water quality.
Yeah, what's in it? Yeah.
So you know what? Maybe the rules have been skewed enough in the dredging for other reasons realm, which is why when that contractor's sitting here and we're explaining to him about what we feel is important and what needs to get dredged and where and pilot projects and stuff like that. You think about that, what do you got? Four boats that use Myakama Pond, guys.
Right.
And what are they, they're fishing for, yeah. So they're not dredging for navigation, it's water quality and water retention.
Mhm.
So, and that goes to what I said earlier, I think we're moving forward a little bit on some of these topics with a broader mind,
As needs to be, because the impacts are much greater than they were. So
And 22,000 people here year round, impacts are far greater.
yes. The demands for the green lawn and it just goes on. Roadside litter. I'm amazed at how different it looks today than it did 20-25 years ago, and it's simply, we've got a larger population, there are more houses and more activity, and everybody's in a hurry. Some carelessness there's some disrespect there. You can't expect the clean team to pick up everything. And God bless them for doing what they do.
Well, they only do the main roads.
Yeah.
The side roads, that's the point.
Right, so I saw a DPW fellow working Old South Road last week, and that's a big road for one guy. And of course, he's only gonna make it so far, and it got me to look at the rest of the area that he hadn't covered yet. And it made me want to stop and get out, and because there was just so much, it made me think of like Old South Road always does, Route 132, Hyannis. It needs a number instead of a name, but All right. We'll move into health of the harbors if there's nothing to discuss with pool water, anything new. We'll keep our ears open on what's happening there with the health department, natural resources. Stormwater runoff and health of the harbors, and harbor impacts. And the discussion of the possible production of the zones contribution brochure with map for property owners. We discussed this a little bit earlier. And I think, you know, Tara sent some information, Dave has sent some information, is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
And we should look at it and come back with ideas, and we'll talk with Tara about, you know, what they intend to do, and hopefully it includes this, a map to each homeowner that shows where they are, and whether it's sent with a tax bill or not. You know, however it gets in their hands would be wonderful. There needs to be some type of introduction, so the homeowner knows it's coming and why. So here again, something we may or may find we don't need to make a recommendation if our voice is being heard and this is agreed to by the departments that are going to create this, and you know, therefore if they create this, it's creating an information highway, hopefully. Anything to add from the board on stormwater runoff, harbor impacts, the production of the zone map, excessive lawn fertilizer use? Just in case something new comes up, I keep this on here. FDA shellfish taking. Tara has given us some updates on that.
So will they come back annually?
I imagine so, but I can't answer that. Dave?
I've never, when this came about, it's the first time it's ever happened.
Your goal is to get a
Shellfish bed.
response to minimize the letter, I think.
Exactly. I mean, we've had shellfish closures forever. There are some historic closures, like from Brant Point to Monomoy. It's a historic closure, you know. But we've also had openings. We had a high enough level of pollution for years at Matticat. Harbor was closed in certain areas. Through water quality efforts, we were able to get it open again. You have seasonal, not seasonal, but you have situational closures where you have a heavy rainfall and you get road runoff, and in the name of safety, so nobody gets sick, the DMF will come in and they'll close an area because they don't want anybody to get sick. But this is the first.
This is arbitrary. It's on some new.
Exactly.
Some new model they've developed, and so it's just an arbitrary thing, and we need to get them to get rid of that arbitrary thing, because it shouldn't be arbitrary. There should be a reason for it.
And
logical reason.
And again, you know, if you look at, if you're on the outside looking in and you look at 2,500 moorings, you look at 3,300, 3,500 boats here during the summer, the red flag immediately, if you're a non-believer, the red flag will go up and you go, man, oh man, that's a lot of sewage that's probably being dumped into that harbor. But then you've got to offset that with the first federal no discharge zone in the second federal no discharge zone in the country. Okay, pumping 120, 130,000 gallons of sewage every year. We've done all the right things. So, but I'm just saying, from a regulatory person sitting behind a desk looking at some numbers, it looks like it could or should be a problem. But I think we, you know,
But that's what Tara's working,
exactly,
and that's why we just keep following up.
yeah, she did a great job with that.
Wasn't some of their basis on boats moored at Halbert Avenue area?
was close to-
perfect example, you know, there's one 30-foot boat over there.
Does anybody have a head? Maybe that one.
Exactly.
And it's a man who owns, his name is White, he owns a catamaran, he has a house over there off of, Lincoln Avenue, Lincoln Street or whatever, comes every year, he probably has a head, but he stays in his house.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, and you talk about one of the best flushed places
Is
in the
right-
joint
yeah.
is right there at the entrance channel.
Mhm.
What do you want from it? You know, it's,
Yeah, somebody,
but if you
Must-
look at an aerial, then that's probably what
Well,
they
that's
did.
what they did.
You look at the aerial and you go, mother of God,
Yes,
there's
it's hard.
200 boats moored right there. Well, I'd be more worried about Pulpus Harbor that doesn't flush well at all. Again, there's no boats up there, we don't allow people to live aboard up there and stuff like that, so. We've done all the right things and Tara worded it very well.
Right.
And the other thing too is, not to belabor this, the other thing too is, if somebody had gotten sick.
Yeah.
And that brought this to the forefront, I'd be leading the parade, but you know what? Nobody got sick.
some,
Arbitrary is the best word
Yeah,
I've heard
yeah.
for that.
some things, are just difficult to understand sometimes. I noticed, probably a 25, 28-foot boat there with 3 engines on the back. Been on its mooring very late in the season. It may still be there now. And I just joke to myself, is that the reason nobody can go cohogging over across the channel? There's this one boat over here. So anyhow, all right, under new business, we have our recommendations for harbor plan update. I think we've discussed this a good amount tonight. If there's anything more, anybody would like to add, now would be the time. Has anybody joined us tonight at all?
Yeah, I'm on here, Andy. It's Amy DeCibio, if you want me.
Yo. Amy, well, first of all, anything else anybody would like to add? On discussion for our recommendations to the harbor plan. Jot down ideas. We should come forward with our ideas, put them together at our future meetings. Amy, would you like to give a briefing?
Yeah, sure. I'll make it quick. And I just want to say it's interesting listening to everything you guys had to say. And it's, you realize how much work goes into doing everything that happens up on the island. I remember at the last meeting listening to this discussion too. There's like a lot to deal with on that small island. And it's so important. So thank you guys for what you do. Because really I didn't even think about all the ponds up there. I was just mostly thinking about the harbor. You have a big job. So thank you. I don't know if everyone in the room was there this summer when Val Oliver and Veronica Bonet and I came in just to do a presentation on the board of AC Residents Against Turbines. And I just wanted to give you a quick update as to where what we're up to really quickly. January 4th, we go to federal court in Boston. Our lawsuit, I think maybe you don't all remember, but our lawsuit is basically saying, US government, you haven't done the proper work, the environmental work, the endangered species work that you should have done before you've allowed the permitting for all of, well, in particular in this case, for the Vineyard Wind 1 farm. Vineyard Wind 1 wind farm that's slated to be constructed off of Nantucket. And just as a quick reminder, the Vineyard Wind 1 farm, wind farm is about 84 turbines, but there are 7 other big projects to follow right behind it. And if all goes according to their plans, there will be a 1,600 square mile wind farm right off of right off of Nantucket, right where the North Atlantic right whale lives and breeds and forages pretty much all year. So it's really sort of its last safe haven. You know, we have an awful lot to say about that. I won't get to you with all that, but I just wanted to tell you that our lawsuit has been filed. It's initially been filed against NOAA Fisheries, which is part of the Department of Commerce, and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, which is part of the Department of the Interior. And then Vineyard Wind has inserted themselves, and the judge allowed them to be. So they will also sit alongside the defendants in this case. There are two interesting developments that have, well, one very interesting development that has come out recently. The New Bedford Light, I don't know if that's a newspaper that is read by people in Nantucket, but it's a local newspaper. And the journalist there had done a Freedom of Information Act request and got a bunch of letters. And one of them is fascinating, and it's since been picked up by Bloomberg News. It was actually cited in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. But this is a very important development, and we are trying to have it admitted into the court. There's a fellow named Sean Hayes, who is, I guess he is the head of, I guess he's the chief of protected species at NOAA Fisheries. He's also like the man, the most important marine guy in the North Atlantic region, in this specific region. So he really is the most senior person within NOAA Fisheries that would cover this region where these wind farms are slated to be built. He wrote a letter to Brian Hooker. He's the lead biologist at the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And I'm happy to forward it to all of you, but it reads pretty much like it came right out of our lawsuit. So this fellow, Sean Hayes, has sort of been now tagged as a whistleblower. I kind of wish that some of the press hadn't really tagged him with that title, because it really sort of puts him on the radar, when I think what's most important is that people inside these agencies, the senior people, put the proper information out there. Who's to say we're right, they're right, but the conversations are not happening. And this is the beginning of a very good conversation. But he is very clear in this letter, and I can send it off to you, but that the most right whale habitat modeling shows a considerable increase in right whale habitat use on the southern New England waters. It goes on and on, just basically to say that it's not going to just be the construction of these wind fields that will go on, or turbine fields that will go on for 30 years, the construction, but actually the operations will also be incredibly harmful, and that there would be no mitigating measures, meaning separating them or whatever, having the vessels only go at certain hours of the day, that this is really detrimental to the North Atlantic right whale, but to really the entire ecosystem that's out there. They also say, and this is one thing that I think is kind of important for you, maybe, but it says the presence of structures such as wind turbines are likely to result in both local and broader oceanographic effects, and may disrupt the dense aggregations and distribution of zooplankton prey, and it goes on and on about that, affecting tidal currents, etc. So I'm not anywhere near up to snuff like you guys sound like you are on this stuff, but it does appear that the effects probably will be much broader than just our ocean out there, that this stuff will affect, it will go beyond that. The second thing is a piece that came from Nature magazine. These scientists have, there's 4 of them. I think they're German and maybe Dutch guys. They've been doing a lot of studies in the North Sea, which is really a good place to study this, because they have had offshore wind there. Although the offshore wind farms there are much smaller, the turbines are much smaller. This is nothing like what is being to the scale of what we are going to see off the east coast of the United States. But doing their modeling, they're talking a lot about the wind wake effect. Are you guys, am I probably talking to a bunch of people who already know exactly what that is? Do you know?
Not at all.
Okay, so the wind wake effect is pretty much if you had a pinwheel in your hand and on a stick, which we used to have as kids, and you blow the pinwheel, and you had your other hand behind the blades on the pinwheel, the wind is diminished because it's being absorbed by the pinwheel. That's what's driving the motion that's moving the pinwheel. So that's a wind wake effect. So essentially out in the ocean, when they're putting these turbines in, they're trying to absorb as much wind as possible so that there's as much blade movement as possible. So they do the opposite of like what a flock of birds would do or a peloton on bicyclists might do. They're actually not trying to cut the wind. They're trying to all absorb the wind. So we separate them out. But the studies are showing that several things are happening. One is that when you take the wind out of the air, you're taking a cooling element away from the surface, which is important to water temperatures, of course. So when you are doing this on a large scale, remember this aggregate, the project out there will be larger than the state of Rhode Island. And if you're taking, every square mile is another turbine, you are taking an enormous amount of cooling from not just the ocean surface, but just out of the vicinity, right? And that this could be beyond just the local immediate 1,600 square mile area, but beyond, which of course makes sense. So how does that impact Nantucket? Well, the studies have not been done. The other thing that it does is wind is important, not just as a coolant for the ocean, but also as it drives oxygen into the water. So oxygen in the water is important for the very basis of the food chain, all the planktons and everything else. So they have done other studies like this. I've seen other studies that the same four scientists, I can't even pronounce half of the last names. Nils Christensen is one that sounds like something I could say, but I've seen these scientists before and talk about it, but now things are up and running. They're really able to do a much better job with their modeling and from what they're actually seeing. So again, I think that that's super important. I know that some of the people that I speak to in other regions that are in Rhode Island and out east on Long Island are pretty concerned about the fish. They're actually from the fishing industry, and they're very worried about these and felt very strongly that this data that's coming from this study is important and really even confirms a lot of the things that this Sean Hayes NOAA fisheries person was saying in his paper as well. So I just wanted to give you that little update. I hope we have some success in January. There's been a lot of information that's been coming out lately, a lot around a much more healthy discussion around wind and wind power. I'm not an energy expert, but it's good that, to me, the most important thing is we really need to have these discussions before we go and, really wreck the ecosystem in the ocean, for a power source that is arguably problematic. So I just think hopefully all the voices like this Sean Hayes person will start to speak up and we can have better discussions. I think that's really the most important thing.
Andy, can I ask a question?
Please do, Mr. Franzuto.
Is it John Hayes or Sean Hayes?
I'm sorry, Sean, SEAN, and I'm happy to forward to you guys. I can send it. I can send it to Andrew if you'd like, and he can distribute it. But the article from the New Bedford Light just starts to shed light on it, and the actual letter itself is embedded in there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a little slow in the forwarding. I'm gonna ask the board, would the board be okay with me sharing your email addresses with Mr. Sibio?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And
I'll-
really appreciate the time. I appreciate it a lot.
Amy, if you would, you had a title or a term for the diminished wind that the turbines absorb.
Yeah, they call it the wind wake effect.
Wind wake effect.
I think to me, I've been trying to understand why they call it, but I guess what they mean is like as in a wake that would be behind a boat. This
Mm.
would be the wake from the wind, and that's what they call it, the wind wake. There's actually more and more stuff that's starting to come out on this now.
And some of the information you had forwarded to us, specifically the sediment plumes caught my eye. And how far the sediment plumes can travel. It does make sense that sediment plumes from this project could easily be tide driven into our harbor. So I'd just like to thank you for bringing this information forward to us. And of course, updating us on your progress with your mission, and anything that you come across that, you know, immediately or directly, like the sediment plume type information is please, I want you to feel comfortable in forwarding that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
What can you tell us about progress that has already begun? I've heard of barges with cable on them
Yep.
being deployed already.
Yes, that's true. The cabling has started. They have not started with the pile driving yet for the actual turbines, but they are. I know on Martha's Vineyard, they are preparing like I don't even know what you call it in their harbor, but like an outstation or something. I think they're going to be launching a bunch of stuff off Martha's Vineyard. They have, they're out there sighting. There's, definitely increased traffic out there, and definitely getting ready to start preparing for the cabling. And I think the one thing that, I know this doesn't relate exactly to what the mission of your board, but I think the community looks to people like you guys to be aware of all these things. And hopefully, again, you may not agree with our position on this or not, but I think what's the most unfortunate thing of all is that these conversations have just been shut down. They've never traveled. Most people, when we speak to them on Nantucket, not just the summer residents, but the year-rounders also really don't know that this project is coming. And I think that that's, or projects, and it's really too bad. I have had an interesting dialogue with Dr. Mandelman at the New England Aquarium. I am really shocked that their position on this has not been stronger. They should be doing what we are doing. This should be their mission. The North Atlantic right whale is their baby. And instead, they have taken money from the wind companies and they are partnering with them to do studies. And the honest truth is that you really could not pick a worse spot in the entire Atlantic Ocean to put these wind turbines, if you are interested in protecting the North Atlantic right whale, which is their mission, than where they are slated to go. And I just cannot get my head around that. I think that, I mentioned that to you the last time we were there. That has been the most disturbing part of this entire last few years of working on this, is that the environmental, NGOs that we really believe are doing their job and really advocating for what they say they're advocating, they don't do their job. And the New England Aquarium is not alone. It's Sierra Club, it's Audubon Society, all of these really important organizations that signal to us what is right and what is wrong. They signal to the legislators and decision makers of what is the right thing to do. And when they take money and now they're compromised, they can't do it. And our legislators are not going to be experts in this. They're not experts. I mean, I'm listening to what you guys are talking about, all the eelgrass and the sediment and this, it takes a long time to get up to speed. Most of what you said, I really don't understand. So we look to our environmental groups to really make sure that the right things happen. And when they're not doing their job, it really messes up the entire system. I am furious with the New England Aquarium. Mandelman is a very nice guy, but he is and I don't know who is the decision maker there. I think a lot of times the executive directors are under a lot of pressure to make sure everybody can get paid. And in bad economic times, they do this, but it's probably in every environmental group that these decisions are sometimes made for the wrong reasons. So it's really, that's been the most disheartening thing. Again, they should be handling this job, not Val Oliver and and a couple of other people. It's just a shame. But I really am grateful, and hopefully you guys will want to learn more about this. You're stewards of our island. And again, thank you so much for what you guys do. It's just, it's amazing. I'm just a summer person, and when we come there, I'm just amazed all the time and how things are maintained. And I'm sure you guys probably roll your eyes and goes, well, we have plenty of problems. So does every community, but there's an awful lot to take care of there, and involving an awful lot of people who all roll in the summer, and your island swells, and that's like a whole other set of problems. But we're very grateful. So thank you for what you do. And again, thank you for listening to me today.
Oh, well, thank you. Hang on there. Scott, did you have a question?
Do you have a
Sure.
do you have a judge assigned, and what venue you're gonna have this lawsuit in?
Yeah, we'll be in Boston. There's a judge assigned. It's a female. I forget her name at the moment. But yes. And so because I guess what they've done is there are 2 other lawsuits that are following us. Specifically to this Vineyard One case. Okay. Vineyard Win One case. There is a group in that's got to get the names of this right. So there's RODA, which is Responsible Offshore Development Association. It's a consortium of people. I think a lot of them are the fisheries, mostly squidders. And I believe they're based in Long Island. And then there's another group off of in Rhode Island. And I don't know if they have an acronym, but I think Seafreeze, also squidders, are involved in that lawsuit. They're not part of our lawsuit directly, but they are citing a lot of the environmental pieces in our lawsuit. So they'll be following us, and the same judge will handle those cases. I guess it's efficient. You get a judge up to speed, you might as well have the same judge work on this. There are other lawsuits popping up and down the coast. There's a big group on Long Beach Island, New Jersey, that's filing one on environmental basis. There's a big group off of Virginia that's doing this that we've talked to. And there are people that we are reaching out to us from California, to be honest with you, New Hampshire. Everybody's interested because this is now going to be a thing on the West Coast, and there's a Pacific right whale, believe it or not. Who knew? So it's good to see that there's been so much more press about this and more reality, I think, just on a practical basis, where people think, oh, this is free, this is going to be cheap. Well, a lot of these wind companies are starting to try to renegotiate their contracts with the grid operator in Massachusetts, because they're now realizing how much more expensive this is going to be. And this is going to be pushed off to us, the ratepayers. So anybody believing that this is free, people need to look at what's happening in Europe. Their rates are skyrocketing. And this happened long before Putin invaded Ukraine. That's what, that's what people want to hear as the story right now, but that's just not the truth. If the wind isn't blowing, then other sources of energy have to be at the ready. So to think that this system is going to really reduce fossil fuel use is not true. There's just a lot of, I could go on forever. I don't want to keep you guys,
I was just going to say, I'm sorry. Let's.
Yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent.
You
I'm
have,
sorry.
You have, yeah.
But
yeah,
thank you.
Appreciate the update, but we
Yep,
just.
go ahead. Yep.
50% of our entire meeting is spent on this.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time again. And
Amy, thank you. Board members, anything else you'd like to have asked Amy? Otherwise, wonderful presentation, well explained. Thank you.
thank you, guys. Have a great Christmas
And
and
you
a
as well.
happy holidays. Happy New Year. Bye-bye now.
You as well. Bye. All right. Anything would you like to recap for our next meeting? Questions or comments? Our next meeting is January 3rd. Yeah, and then January 20th, so just 2 weeks away. Okay, of course, if anybody's plans extend beyond that, that'll be perfectly understood. So, if there's nothing else, I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
Second.
Motion's made by Mr. Franzuto, seconded by Mr. Anderson to adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor, Mr. Franzuto.
Aye.
Mr. Anderson.
Aye.
Mr. Payer.
Aye.
Mr. Bossy.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Good night. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy